Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Melissa. I'm an event host for Power to Fly. I'm based in Buenos Aires. And we have so much to talk about today that I don't want to waste a lot of time on this, but I do want to go over a couple of quick housekeeping guidelines for us today. Oh, sorry. So if you joined one of these chats before, you do know that this is a conversation. So you can all participate. Let me know if you want to unmute and ask questions, add comments. But that said, I've muted you all by default, so we avoid that noise, background noise, weird noise that might interfere. So if you have something to add to the conversation, you can use our chat box, or you can let me know so I unmute you and you can participate. If you're concerned about privacy, know that you won't show up on our recording or on our live streaming as long as you don't come off mute. If you'd like to participate with a question or comment raised anonymously, you should make me know so I unmute you and you can participate. Sorry, I don't know if you are listening like an echo, something. Show up on our recording or on our live streaming as long as you don't come off mute. It's not working. Wait a minute, please. Comment raised anonymously because I'm listening. Let me know so I unmute you and you can participate. Sorry, I don't know if you are listening like something. Show up on our recording or on our live streaming. A second, please. Are we okay now? Is everything solved?
I think
yeah.
so.
Sorry, technical stuff. So I was telling you. So you won't appear on the recording, but if you'd like your question or comment raised anonymously, remember to pick my name from the chat box drop-down menu, so you send it to me and not to everyone. And as I just told you, this session is being recorded, so there's no need for you to be taking down notes. You can relax, enjoy the conversation, and then from 2 to 3 days from today, you will receive a follow-up email where you'll get a link to access to this conversation. So that being said, I'm excited to introduce you to Bosky. So Bosky, can you please tell us a bit more about your background, what you're talking about today, why you're here with us?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be joining all of you today and sharing some of my learnings along the way. I'm Bosky Mukherjee. I've been in the tech industry all my life. Lots of gray hairs. I'm also losing some of my hair. The running joke in my family is my husband will often say and ask me whether that happens because I'm a mother to a very rambunctious 8-year-old boy, or whether that is indeed just being in the tech industry for as long as I've been. But you know, jokes apart, that's where I started. I love everything about technology. I'm really passionate about breaking down a lot of the biases that exist for people who perhaps don't have the pedigree or come from very different walks of life that perhaps makes it difficult and challenging for us to get into tech and thrive in tech. So that has been my passion for many, many, many years. I stumbled accidentally into the world of product management and product design almost 20 years ago, when these things weren't called by these names, but I just loved this field. And over the years of being a hiring manager, I worked in the Bay Area for a little bit, also with Atlassian. I was just telling Melissa, I've lived and worked in 7 or 8 different countries, including tiny islands like Bermuda. These days, I'm living in Vancouver in Canada. I'm also a founder of PMDojo, which is a really diverse and inclusive platform where We help people who are trying to get into tech, break into tech, but perhaps don't have that experience to get into tech, get that real world industry experience with mentorship and community. And so that's what we do. Happy to talk about that if anyone has questions. What else? I think that's about it. I think Power to Fly is one of my favorite communities. I've been part of these live learn and chat sessions quite a few times now, and I love the work that you all do. And so, yeah, when I had the opportunity to talk about the topic around how do you grow your career in product, I just had to say yes. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you very much. We are also really excited, and I'm sure everyone that's here is also excited. So for the sake of keeping things conversational, we've gathered all of the questions you've submitted before this call, and we've organized them in a flow, in what we think it's a nice flow. So let's jump in. So, wait, that's it. Bosky, our icebreaker question would be, what soft skills are necessary to thrive in the product industry?
Soft skills?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I had answered this in our event. I think it was last week, a couple of weeks ago, but I think from a soft skills standpoint, I think having high agency is really important in a product role. Whether you are a product manager, a designer, or a researcher, having those skills to figure things out, because oftentimes, multiple times in a day, we are going to be confronted with problems that we have no clue how to solve. This happens even during interviews. We don't know the answer, but it is these high agency skills that help us figure out, proceed 2 steps, and at least kind of get to a place where we can share how far we've come with someone else, and then again, kind of try to kind of figure it out from there. So that figuring out without knowing all of the answers is a really, really important skill, not twiddling our thumb and saying, well, I don't know how to solve it. You know, what can happen, or waiting for someone else to solve, but really kind of, I think having that entrepreneurship skills, really problem solving skills, and going further and further along than actually being spoon fed is really important as a soft skill. I think the second soft skill would be around storytelling. Big thing that we do day in and day out. You know, we have to storytell. It comes in how we communicate, whether it is with our teams, whether it is with our cross-functional peers, whether it is for our leaders, really succinctly communicating what we have to say, but at the same time, telling that thing with a plot, the characters involved, you know, the highs and the lows is so important to just get that attention and also make ourselves memorable, right? So I would say storytelling, again, is a really, really important skill. I think the third soft skill, you know, empathy, listening in, and empathy is so important again. A lot of the times it is very hard because confirmation bias is there. We all have that, right? And there's no way to escape from it. But if you're aware of it, and if we try to listen in with no judgment and no preconceived notion, it becomes really helpful, because oftentimes what happens is that we hear what we want to hear. A lot of the times our mind plays those tricks, right? Because that confirmation bias is so strong. So I would say just these 3. There are tons of other soft skills as well, but I think when we're talking about soft skills, it's also important to, I think, maybe talk about hard skills as well, right? And from a hard skill standpoint, I would say having business acumen is really, really important. You don't have to have an MBA to get a business acumen, but we have to be naturally curious enough to learn things about the business where we are working. You know, how is the business making money? Why is the business existing in the first place? You know, what is happening that is enabling this business to even remain in the game and play this game, because there are so many other folks who are trying to do the same thing. What are some of the things that we are going to have to do day in and day out in our role that is going to impact the business or can impact the business negative, positive way? How's the business making money, saving money, losing money? A lot of those things is really important. Again, you don't have to have an MBA, but it's important to be naturally curious, to be willing to seek answers to that, right? So I think that is really important. And that I consider it a hard skill, but it's also a soft skill of continuously wanting to learn. I think the second skill would be just being fanatic about prioritizing. You know, whether you're a designer, whether you are a researcher or a product manager, you have to be really, really good at prioritizing your time and prioritizing your work. How good is good enough is very, very difficult in product world. You can keep on trying to perfect. You can keep on waiting for getting another data point to validate what you're thinking, but there is no perfection. And so it's really important to kind of know what are your constraints around that you can manage that time, and also to manage your own stress level so that you don't get burnt out, because that is very, very common in tech industry. And I think the third skill that I would, again, really recommend is doodling and visualizing, not just for designers, but if you're a product manager or a researcher, it's really important to be comfortable and start getting better with how can you visualize and doodle, even if it's in stick figures, but really start getting comfortable with that.
Thank you. That's a lot we learned. So our next question would be, how can we foster our problem-solving skills in a product role?
How do you foster problem-solving skills? You know, practice is really important. It is like a muscle that the more we practice, the better we get. Problem solving is almost like a cliche, right? You know, we live in a world where there's so many problems these days that regardless of whether we are in a product role or not, we have to just get better in solving problems. But I think some of the ways that I like to work on even today is, I think, practicing. It is about not getting hung up on using a particular framework to solve a problem, because I think a lot of the times, anytime there is a problem solving question that comes in or a challenge in front of us, many of us will be like, okay, what framework can I use to do this? Maybe call me old fashioned. I don't know. Maybe that's how I got into product in the first place. Back then, there were no courses or books or frameworks, like nothing was codified. And it was really about, I think, jumping back to those first principle thinking. How do we solve problem? You know, how did the humans, or back many years ago, how did we discover fire? You know, how was the wheel invented? There were no frameworks. You know, that was the part of discovery and solving a problem, because there was something, it was trying different ways, but using good judgment. And I think those are first principles, like in very layman terms, I like to go to that, right? So not jumping to framework, but really trying to figure out, well, what are some of the questions at this point that we need answers to, right? And then trying to figure out, well, how can we get answers? A lot of the times, I think I've seen people who are either interested in a product role or even in a product role, when it comes to problem solving, we will go back into our desk and try to solve it by ourselves. At the end of the day, how things happen in the real world, it's never about ourselves. And so the value of that different perspective is so important. And so it is about working with different people and facilitating intelligent conversations so that we can solve problems together. I think that is something really important. I think thinking hard is more important than doing. A lot of the times we jump into problem solving. I think before we solve problem, it is important to really understand what the problem is. I think a lot of us jump into solving the problem and jump into defining the solution. Like, it's going to be a web app. Oh, it's going to be a marketplace. Oh, it's going to have like these buttons and these are the things that's going to happen. But we really need to understand, in order to solve problem, I think it's really, really important to understand what is the problem. You know, are we looking at an adjacent problem? Are we looking at a sub problem within this problem? What are some of the possible pain points? What is the pain point that is worth solving? Because we cannot solve everything with the resources that we have. Writing really helps. I think a lot of things sound great in our head, but then when we start writing it down, we are going to often find that we contradict, like those things that sounded great in our head don't quite sound great in our head. Again, it's a very broad topic and a deep topic, but hopefully that gave some ideas and insights.
It definitely does. So you've mentioned this, so maybe you can just, if you have some new to add, the hard skills necessary for the product industry. You've mentioned some of them, but if you want to add something on this, if you don't, we can continue.
I think I would like to maybe talk about, I think a lot of people get hung up when it comes to hard skills on, I need to learn coding. I need to learn all the different, I think the technical tool stack. I need to understand everything in technology. I need to understand AI and machine learning and all of those things. These are hard skills, but these are not, I wouldn't say that in all situations, these would be the most important hard skills to learn in order to get into the tech industry. There are lots of different roles, even within product. There are some very technical product roles and some are not so technical product roles, even as a product manager. So I would say, don't just get into the bandwagon that we have to learn how to code, we have to learn, all of those other skills. I think learning how to work around with data and understand data, not so much from running models, but how do you infer? How do you infer insights if you look at data? Because data can also tell us things, what we want to see. Like you can interpret data very, very differently a lot of the times. And so it's, again, really important to, I think, learn how to infer those insights from data. So yeah, I mean, if there are like very specific questions around the hard skills, maybe in the chat window, we can maybe talk about it, but I think I would be good with that for now.
Okay, thank you. So our next question would be, how can we advocate for ourselves to get opportunities? In the product industry, of course.
Yeah. So advocacy is really important. A lot of the times, the work that happens behind the scenes in the product, a lot of the discovery work, like really trying to figure out what has to be solved, what is the problem to be solved, that happens a lot of the times in the background. The paradox in the situation here is that the product roles are very, very visible roles, but at the same time, it is also hidden because as a product manager, for example, you're not writing the code, right? You're not writing the code that's actually going to, result in something that's getting built. You're doing a lot of the things, but at the same time, if the decisions that you're enabling in the team, if they are very high stake decisions, so they can do a lot of good, but they can also do a lot of bad or not so good things. And so that's why I think it becomes really important to advocate and evangelize, and for people in the rest of the company to know the value that people in product are adding. A lot of the times, you will find that the kudos and the recognition is being given to a lot of other people. I'm saying a lot of times, not always, a lot of times. And then the product managers, as an example, I'm just using product manager as an example, are hardly ever given kudos. If you have a really good boss, they are going to recognize you in an open forum. But usually you are yourself giving kudos to everyone else. And so that acknowledgement is really, really important. And so if you don't ask for yourself, if you don't ask for whether it is more complex projects, whether it is promotion, whether it is more money, it's very hard to get that. So some of the ways of, I think, advocating for yourself, I have always made my teams do this exercise, when I've been, like I'm leading my team. And it's something called a brag document. It can be called I am awesome document. I used to call it I am awesome document in my teams. And every single kudos, appraise, every single thing that they did that was an accomplishment, they would actually just put it. It didn't matter where you wanted to put it. It could be in an Excel spreadsheet, it could be in a Google sheet, it could be in a Google Doc. I don't think the tool is important, but you would put it so that When things are not going well, you can always go back there and see all the amazing things that you did. But it also helps you to advocate for yourself during one-on-one meetings with your managers, during your performance reviews. It also kind of helps you come up with explaining about what do you do as your elevator pitch a lot of the times. So just having that, because it's easy to forget all of the good things that we accomplish in the light of all of the other things that perhaps are not that impactful, right? So I am awesome is a tool that I've always used with my teams and encourage them. I haven't used it myself. Well, sometimes I forget, but I have always encouraged my teams to do it because it is easy to forget to do that. I think the second thing about advocating for yourself is I think a lot of us, we feel very nervous and we feel very scared to reach out to some of the senior level folks and just say, hey, you have some amazing career journey. I'm really kind of interested to learn from you. I think that's a very, very scary proposition, right? Because we feel, what if they say no? What if they just ignore our message? It's very hard. But what is the worst thing that can happen? Because if we don't ask, we will never know. If we don't ask, we will also not learn what might be a better way to ask. And maybe the way we're asking is not working, so we don't get the signal to maybe tweak our messaging. And I've often found that when people come and ask more from a learning standpoint, as opposed to being mentored, people senior enough are way more open to actually working with you and having conversations with you. And you really need champions within your organization so that they can also advocate on your behalf. And I think that is really, really key, because if people don't know you, then no one's going to advocate for you. And it's really hard to advocate for yourself all the time, right? And I think that brings me to the third point, which is it's not just enough to be in the good books with your immediate manager. Like, you really need to start building relationships with people 1 level, 2 level, 3 level up, and figure out how you can get them to your side so that they even know, especially in larger organizations, that you exist. What do you care about? And what is the work that you're doing? And how is it impacting the business? And again, that's where the business acumen really helps. Did that answer your question?
It did, indeed. So our next question is, how can we gain product-related experience as beginners?
Awesome. I might actually throw in my plug point here as well, but there are lots of ways. There is no one way, like this is the recipe to follow. But if you don't have experience as a product manager, as a designer, as a researcher, there's so many countless roles in product function these days, right? You can always, like I was mentioning, we live in a world that has just so many problems. So there are always problems around. You can always find a problem that exists in the market, not something that is annoyance for you, but a problem that exists in the market, and you can try to solve it, right? The important thing would be to actually solve it in a way that product managers and designers in the real world solve, not just come up with a bunch of frameworks and just write a case study. I'm not talking about that. So that is something that you can always do. You can always reach out to your friends, come together, work as a team, because it's very easy to agree with ourselves, right? Like, have you ever tried to brainstorm by yourself? All ideas sound wonderful, right? And we often end up thinking after that exercise, wow, I mean, I've done so good. And we do
I'm brilliant, yes.
We do need days like this when we can kind of give a pat at the back. I mean, I often brainstorm with my dog, and every time I'm talking to him, he's going to give me a little kiss, right? Like, he's in total agreement. But in the real world, we're working with people. And as people, as humans, we are complex creatures, right? We have different agendas. We may have had a bad day that impacts how we work with other people, and conflict, good or bad, disagreement, good or bad, is day in and day out, especially in a role in product. So I think it's really important to get experience working with other people when you're trying to solve that problem. So that's one thing. You can always join PMDojo. I mean, that this is a big reason why, PMDojo was born 2.5 years ago, and this was to help people get that real world experience. And so you can join PMDojo in one of the cohorts. You get to work in a cross-functional team, and you're solving a real problem. And in 10 weeks, you actually launch a live product. So you can get to work as a researcher, a designer, a product manager. You work with developers as well. And you can also get matched up with a real company and help that company, launch a product. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. You can also, if you're working at a tech company and you have a product team internally, usually, most cases, product teams are very, very understaffed, very, very understaffed. And so if you can position yourself in a way where you may want to help out one of the internal teams, whether it is note-taking during customer interviews, whether it is just ask them, where you can help them. I think you can start filling out some of the gaps, but you have to do it very tactfully so that, we don't become a nuisance for that team, or we're not trying to slow them down, but we're actually adding value. They can actually fill some of the gaps that you have. But if you're looking for end-to-end experience, that full-blown experience, then you have to launch something in the market to get that, right? Not just rely on a course or a boot camp. So yeah, you can work on a side project on your own. You can always join PMDojo. And I think, Melissa, you've given a link on the chat window, right?
Yes, I did. So we have one question from the audience. What advice would you provide to strengthen technical writing skills? I mean, they rephrase it like, how does one become comfortably writing technically? Do you have any advice on this?
How do you become comfortable writing technically? Are you talking about technical writing when it comes to technical companies, like writing technical documentation, or is the person who's asking the question, is it more for writing in tech as a product manager, a designer, or a researcher? Can I get some clarification, please?
Maybe if Kyle can give us some clarification on that. I don't know if he's listening now. Maybe while we wait, okay. I can, both, sorry, he already answered. Thank you, Kyle. He said okay. Both.
Okay, awesome. So Kyle, I think I'm going to break down the answer in two parts. So if you're looking to get better in technical writing within products, right? The key would be to really understand, let's say, what the product really does, right? What are some of the use cases under which that product functionality is going to get exposed? You still have to kind of understand the context of the users who are going to be using, but writing it in a way which doesn't seem like your opinion, right? But it is coming with that conviction, and it's coming, that someone would be able to trust, right? So I would say the ways to get better in that is to actually start writing and getting feedback, right? And maybe the first few ones you're going to write and it's not going to be great, right? So you can get internal feedback from your teams. You can also start measuring the engagement from the users when you publish this at a company and start to see what works, what doesn't work. User testing is awesome. And I know that user testing may not be one of the most common tools that a lot of technical writers use, but there's nothing stopping us from writing a piece as a draft and kind of showing it to a few users and basically kind of asking them to tell you what is going on in their head as they're reading it, right? So again, that is kind of really good to start getting better and practice. Writing is extremely hard. And it's a very learned skill, and it's a muscle. So again, practice, but don't forget the beauty and the importance of, I think, user testing, because at the end of the day, what you're writing, your audience has to connect with it and they have to find it valuable. And there are signals that they're going to give you both qualitatively and quantitatively for you to understand whether what you're writing is resonating with them. So that's one thing. The second piece is that if you want to get better in writing as a product manager or a designer or a researcher, you're going to be writing things very differently, right? So again, it comes down to whether you're writing to building your personal brand online so that you become more visible and you come under search results for companies, recruiters, and hiring managers looking for you. something that we do a lot in PMDojo, again, is for you to write and express your point of view. You know, as product people, we have to have very strong point of views that is deduced from evidence and data. They don't have to be opinions, but at the same time, those strong point of views have to be loosely held. And there is a paradox in it, which means that we need to have a strong point of view. We need to believe, we need to have conviction, and that is coming from data and evidence. But at the same time, we have to be open and flexible and not get stubborn that when someone else from our team or new data emerges, they basically tell us something that makes our point of view not so good, or maybe it doesn't hold any more ground, that we should be flexible and humble enough to accept that a different point of view, right? So I think that is really important. And that comes from writing, you know, anything that you learned, write it. Like, you know, you're attending today's session. If there's something that resonates with you, write about it on LinkedIn, right? Tag Power to Fly, you can tag me. A lot of people get into the pressure that when they write, they have to write the quality of Elon Musk, like they have to come up inventing something. If you do, great, great for you. But for majority of the mortals around here, you know, the point of view does not have to be something reinventing, something discover. It is just your perspective and you're bringing it to the table. You're learning something new, share it so that you can inspire someone else who, this is something I believe in. You want to write and you want to share what you're learning with others, not to get X number of likes, but hopefully to help someone who might be even one step behind you learning. And I think that's where learning in public and sharing what you're learning and sharing your knowledge actually really helps. If you're part of an organization, try to do lunch and learns, you know, try to do brown box lunch sessions, where if you've learned something, come and share it with others in your team. Hopefully I've been able to answer that question. And again, for that, writing is really important. I cannot hear you, Melissa.
Yeah, I know. So Kyle said it was really helpful. Kyle, you're sending it just to me. So I will tell Bosky. He says it's really helpful. It's a great perspective, a holistic approach, scientific method in use to what to write. Blogging, he says, would be a good choice.
Yes.
So following. The next question, maybe we can deduce some of the tips with the answers you gave us before, because they are so comprehensive. We thank you for that. But we will ask you if you want to add things. What are ways to grow inside a company? We have had some tips, but if you want to build on that.
Yeah, how do you grow in a company? Absolutely. How do you grow in a company? It's a very, very, very deep question, and I know it probably deserves a very deep answer, but at a high level, something that I have unlearned over the years, I'm going to start with that. You know, I came to the US as an immigrant, right? You know, I grew up in India. I think culturally, socially, our environment plays a big role in how we perceive what success is and what growing in our career is. So for me, coming as an immigrant in the US, you know, I didn't have generational wealth. I came with just a few dollars, and I had to often debate whether I'm going to be putting those extra tomatoes in my burger, because that would mean $1 extra, and I would convert that $1 into Indian rupees, and bingo, my head would just explode, because, you know, the common immigrant problem, right? For me, there was no excuse, no other option than to work hard. Work harder than everyone else, because if I don't work hard, I'm not going to get anything. You know, I also didn't come from a very affluent family in India. We're a very, very middle-class family. And if we did X, Y would not happen, right? My parents did a lot of things to get me and my younger sister to a place where we would be in a place where we could at least do something and hopefully return back all of the loans that my parents took to send us to North America. But I think culturally and socially, what I had done, and I see this happen to a lot of people, is that we just get so burnt out, and we just believe that growing our career means that we have to keep on climbing the ladder. Growing our career means that at a certain point, if we have to grow further, we have to become a people manager. We have to start managing people. So I think some of the things that I've learned is that there are lots of ways to grow your career in tech and grow in product. That does not necessarily mean you have to just keep on climbing the ladder. Something that happened to me was that by the time I rose to being promoted as the president of a tech company, I had become completely hollow and completely burnt out. My doctor gave me 3 months to live in 2019 if I did not change things. And I'm not saying this is going to happen with everyone, but I think a lot of people believe that you just have to climb up the ladder, right? If you have to grow. So knowing that it's really important to reflect a little bit and figure out what kind of work and what kind of breadth and scope and depth of work is something that we really enjoy. A certain promotion might not be the right promotion at a given point of time, right? And again, this may mean a lot of different things. Stuff happens in our life, right? If there is a lot of stuff happening in our life, perhaps taking on that particular promotion, like you have to really be sure that it is the right thing and you're going to be able to do justice to both sides of the equation, your life and your career. And you can say no to a promotion, but you have to say it in a tactful way so that the company doesn't think that you're not suited for any promotions going down the road, right? So I think to answer your question, understand what do you really like to do. Understand that even as an individual contributor, you can still grow in your career. Growing your career doesn't mean that you have to become a people manager, because you cannot manage people like products. It is a very different role as a people manager than actually being a product manager or being a product designer or being a product researcher, right? Asking, when you see opportunities that are there and you see that the company is considering other candidates, or maybe the company's even put out the job for external candidates, and if you believe that you would be awesome in that role, ask. Because a lot of the times I have seen this happen to myself as well, that my managers did not know necessarily that I am looking to grow in my career and I am looking to climb up the ladder. They assumed sometimes that I was happy where I'm doing because I was already doing so many things. And so it's very important to express what you really want, what you really, really want. If you're looking for career growth, if you're looking for promotions, you have to make that known. But a common mistake is a lot of people will say, well, I want to be promoted. Why am I not getting promoted? Or I want to be promoted. What do I need to do to get promoted? It's very important to bring your manager on board so that they have a skin in the game in making sure that they are promoting you and advocating for you. Because when all the promotions and the salary increases happen behind closed doors, you need someone to be speaking for you on your behalf compared to everyone else, because there's usually a salary pool, right? Like there's that money pool that goes into salary increases and things like that. So that's really important. I think not just asking, but also trying to figure out how you can make, how you can have your manager have a skin in the game. That can happen through lots of different ways. You can talk about the benefit that you can bring in by making the life of your manager easy. That is a very, so I think people often forget that our managers are humans too. And I know managers get a lot of bad name, but at the end of the day, they're dealing with a lot of stuff in their life. They're just like us. Someone else's, after their throat from the top. And it gets very, very lonely at top, right? It's very easy to rant and complain, and I've done that too. But when you climb up higher and higher, it's going to get extremely lonely. So I think empathizing with them for good managers and making sure that, you can find ways to communicate and storytell your desire to climb up in the ladder, but in a way that you can actually speak to the benefit of how you can actually make their life easier, their manager's life easier, I think goes a long way in advocating. But simply asking, I think, goes a long way. A lot of people, we don't even ask. We just let things happen and hope that our good work is going to speak for itself. If you're working in a government organization or some other big companies where tenure becomes the criteria for getting promotions and climbing up the ladder, great. But in majority of the private companies, tenure means nothing. So I don't know if I answered that question.
You did. So moving on, we have another question, which is, What are some relevant certifications you recommend for this industry?
For product or for tech in general? Should I answer?
I mean, they didn't specify.
Okay.
It's just the industry. So maybe you can speak about both.
Okay.
If you want.
So I'll answer for both. So in the tech industry, there are lots of different roles, right? Of course, product is a field within tech, but then you also have, several like development, DevOps, so many of these different roles, which are very, very technical, right? Like you will have to kind of muck around with code and things like that, and really like the low stack, the lower level of the granularity. So for that, like if you're interested, let's say in DevOps and things, there's going to be like standard certificates that are there. If you're interested in AWS and things like that, there's going to be certificates there that you can easily kind of search online and you will basically get it, right? So every technical role, very of these technical roles will have some certification so that you know the tool. But just know that just having a certificate is not going to be enough. So let's say, for example, if you have come from, let's say, nursing background and somehow you have found yourself into the tech world and now you want to get into, let's say, AWS or something, IoT and AWS, and suddenly you've never worked in this field and suddenly you do a certificate, it's going to mean nothing. So the certificate and your previous experience has to marry together so that the certificates can bolster your experience. That's in the tech field. In the product field, I'm going to be disappointing many of you to say that there is no certification. I know that there are lots of certificates out there in the market, and many schools, training institutes, vendors will say the certificate is really like gold standard. It's an industry recognized certificate, but just know that there is no industry recognized certificate in the world of product, right? Product hasn't been codified, unlike project management. So these folks are just giving those sort of like these, accolades to themselves. It's self-marketing. And as hiring managers, we don't look at certificates. So just know that if your gap is knowledge, then you have to figure out and get that knowledge. And certificates, they'll typically teach you one-on-one principles. You can get that online as well. So again, what I'm saying is I'm not dishing certificates. It's really important to know how do you address that particular gap that is coming between you and whatever your career goal is. If it is experience that is coming in between, the lack of, then just know that no matter how many certificates you do and how much money you spend, no matter of certificate and courses is going to give you that experience. So this is where you have to either work on side projects, join PMDojo, do something where you can get that real world experience. So short answer, in the world of product, there are no certificates. The hiring managers don't look at certificates. There is a blog in PMDojo where I had talked with several hiring managers. I can definitely share that in the chat with you, Melissa, that actually talked about how hiring managers perceive certifications.
That's great. Okay. So our next question is, what roles does mentorship play in the product industry? And is there any mentorship program you could recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Mentorship is huge, I think, in any industry, right? But then what is really important, I think, I wish I knew this early on in my career, but what is really important is that not all mentorship is equal. There are different kinds of mentorships. Sometimes you may just need to pick someone's brain, right? In that case, having mentorship, and Melissa, I'm just going to share with you this link, which is a blog about certificates, if you want to share it with everyone. There are lots of different ways, and sometimes you may just have a quick question, right, that you can ask, your community and get the answer. But what I wanted to share is that you have different kind of mentors. You have mentors who will help you learn the craft, right, of your job, of your role, perhaps help you with blockers. They are there available for quick answers and things like that. These mentors you can find, they can be either your boss, can be your boss's boss, it can be someone externally as well. And I'm going to talk about mentorship programs and where can you find mentors and things like that. But that is one kind of mentor. Then you have another kind of mentor who are basically your sponsors. And they're really, really, really important. These are also known as champions. These are also known as allies. But there is a subtle difference between all of these. But champions are folks where, or sponsors are folks where you don't go to them for your day-to-day problem. They're not going to, you don't go to them for question and answer. You go to them for kind of coaching, right? They are not going to be there giving you answers, but they will help you problem solve, go to a point where you can discover those answers yourself. They might also be people who are going to advocate for you internally in the organization, sometimes externally as well. You know, I did not even realize that I had this individual who was sponsoring and championing me in one of the companies when I was working, and that company was going through a merger and acquisition. I was left out as a director of product. And the merger acquisition conversations were happening with few other exec leaders, and I was left out for whatever reasons. You know, we can always say I was the only person of color in the exec room. Maybe I was the only woman in the room. Maybe I was not capable. I don't know, but there are lots, I was not included in there. And they started having a lot of conversations with the potential buyers to a point where they needed some perspective. And so I would basically do the work and they would go and present it. At one point, there was someone out there externally to our organization who was helping our company with the acquisition process that actually said, you know what, we need Bosky in the room because she's the one who's doing a lot of this work. Had it not been for that person, I would have never been involved in this whole process, gotten a seat at the table, and then for our potential parent company that acquired us for actually then promoting me to the president of the company, right? So you never know where these champions, they're very different than your mentor. I hadn't even met this person before, but they were enough to see that potential. So you do need champions like that. I think that is really important for someone advocating for yourself, I think to the question that we talked before. And then you have allies, and these allies could be people, again, internally or externally to your company, who actually support you. They support people from maybe a certain minority intersectional group, or maybe they support some another cause. You happen to relate with the cause, or you happen to kind of belong to that minority group, or not a minority group, whatever that is, but they really care about that. And just because of that relatability, they can actually support and champion you, and you can go to them for certain challenges that you have or things that you need advice for. So there are lots of, I think it's really important to understand what kind of mentor do you need for what kind of challenge that you have, and at what point in your career you may need different kind of mentors. And again, something that I've learned is that when you go and ask someone, like I get these requests a lot of the time on LinkedIn from people I have no idea. I love your career journey. Can you be my mentor? I would love to learn from you. Mentorship takes a lot of effort on the person who's mentoring. And typically, if you just go and ask someone, can you be my mentor? It puts a lot of weight on them for people who really want to be doing a good job with mentoring, because they need to, again, have a skin in the game and see you success. It's not just these transactional Q&As, right? You really want them involved, and you want them to be okay with taking time out of their busy life, busy work, and making sure that you're set up for success. And so what I've learned in a hard way is that every time I've went and asked someone to be my mentor, I've usually either gotten a no response or basically a no after some time. And I've typically since then learned that a lot of these mentorship relationships happen in a very informal, unstructured way. Where these are these casual conversations that happen. It's more about, hey, I would love to kind of learn about X from you. I'd love to kind of learn more about your journey. Usually people love talking about themselves. And over time, you may realize that it becomes this really two-way osmosis relationship, right? Where they also enjoy being with you. And then they become that trusted source where you can go to them, and then you can figure out where to take that. Regarding mentorship programs, if you're a woman and you identify yourself as a woman, and you're interested in product, you can always join Women in Product. There are lots of folks who may mentor, but again, know what kind of mentors you are there. Power to Fly is an amazing community as well to connect with other leaders, to find mentors. PMDojo is an awesome community where, you have mentorship for life, and also people who champion you. So yeah.
Thank you. So another question is, As the product field is constantly changing, how can we stay on top of the new advancements?
So yes, it is changing. I think the tech industry is also changing a lot. I think reading is important. It's never something I think that goes out of fashion, you know. But I think where the challenge is I think prioritizing or figuring out what to learn, because there is so much to learn, right? There are countless books, there are countless events, there are countless podcasts, there is just countless things we can do, but we only have 24 hours in a day. Hopefully we all are sleeping 8 hours, hopefully. So I think this was one of my bosses many years ago, had mentioned to me something that I did not understand the gravity of what they said at that point of time, but years later, I think I understood. And I always tell folks that I mentor is just-in-time learning. And that is, the tech industry and the product field is evolving and changing at such a rapid pace that we are going to basically drive ourselves crazy if we are going to try to learn everything at one go, right? And so it is about kind of making sure that we are able to figure out and identify the key learning gaps today that we have that is stopping us from achieving whatever that next thing that we're trying to do, and then prioritize what we are learning, which is just-in-time learning. But then you have an inventory of resources available to you that you can just kind of bookmark and identify that, okay, if I want to learn about APIs as an example, these are some of the resources, but I don't need to learn about APIs right now because I'm not there yet. Right? Like I used to get so hung up and so stressed out that I have to learn everything that I would just feel like I'm constantly trying to catch up. In the product field, you are going to be so busy throughout the day that your brain is going to probably become a mushy piece, by the time you wrap up work, whatever that time of the day is. And I'm not recommending people to be working 60, 70 hours. I do not believe in that. I absolutely do not believe in that. There is a way to work smarter and still do the right kind of, and still be able to make the right kind of impact. But by the time, you're going to come back home, or whenever you have that reading time available, you're going to get so exhausted that you will just constantly feel like you're trying to catch up, and you're trying to basically get on a train that is moving at such a fast pace, and you can never catch up, and you're going to start doubting yourself. You're not going to feel good about it, and you're not going to enjoy being in this field. And so I would say just prioritizing. It was one of the hard skills we talked about right in the beginning, that not everything has to be learned right now. Focus on what do you need to learn. Yes, AI and machine learning is becoming a big thing. Do you need to learn it right now, or do you need to just get a very high level understanding of how things fit? Web3 is becoming a big thing. Do you need to learn everything about it right now? Maybe not, but maybe just being aware and then putting it, in your list, in your inventory of, okay, this is something that if an opportunity does come along, well, I'm going to brush up on that and I'm going to learn. Maybe I'm not going to be interested in it completely, or maybe I'm going to get interested. Then that's when you start picking up things and going deep. So it's breadth and depth. Does that make sense?
Yes, a lot. So we have our last question. Okay. We're about to wrap up. So the last question is, where does the product field stand today? And what are some challenges you believe the industry will face?
I love this question for so many different reasons. The product field, the product discipline within the tech industry, it's evolving. It's still evolving. It only came into existence maybe about 10 years or so. And of course, the product design, service design, these fields are even more recent than product management. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we are kind of, maybe I'm going to answer this in a way like, where do I see this going? And then maybe we can go into some of the challenges. I think what I'm seeing right now, and this has already started happening, but not so widely, is that we are seeing more and more people who don't fit the stereotypical definition of what it looks like to be in a product, getting into the product field, right? So long time ago, when product was coming up and coming, you had a lot of these big tech companies hire people from the backyard, right? For obvious reasons, right? The founders, the people were in Stanford, they hired people from there, right? Like, these top universities. And so, of course, when you're going to these top universities, you had to have that pedigree. You had to come from a certain demographic, to be going there for most part, right? And so it was kind of felt like it was still part of that elite club that the rest of us couldn't belong, right? It's still there, but I think some of those walls are breaking down. So what's going to be really important is for a lot of those walls to break down completely, right? I see people from nursing, from teaching, from social work getting into product. So it's not just limited to folks who come from software engineering, or it's not just limited to people who come from top tier universities. It is not limited to people, who look a certain way or who have the same level of opportunities to have a career in product. And I see this a lot, which is obviously, it makes me very happy because, again, that is a big part of, why I left the corporate world and I started PMDojo, right? So I think that is something that's really, really important. Like, you don't have to have a boot camp. You don't have to go to a boot camp. You don't have to have college degree to be in product. I mean, we have a mentor in our community who's a chief product officer and he doesn't have a college degree. I have an alumni who went to PMDojo who doesn't have a college degree and has joined as a product manager at a tech company, right? So I think a lot of those things I think those walls are breaking down. But I think this brings up an interesting challenge because how do you onboard people who don't come from the typical tech background? Needs very different kind of thinking at companies, right? How do you retain this talent? How do you help folks who come from these different paths learn how to leverage their skills and their experiences and their perspective, package them up nicely and speak for themselves? I think a lot of those things, and this is why championship and allyship is so important. So that's one. I think the second thing is tech is everywhere. This is not a surprise. But what is so surprising a lot of the times that I find is that a lot of people don't consider themselves working in tech yet. So for example, someone who's working in Lowe's or someone who's working in Home Depot, and these are all US companies, but these could be like retailers and things like that. They think they're not working in tech because a lot of people believe that if you have to work in tech, you have to be a software developer or you have to be a product manager. You have to have this title. But at the end of the day, all of these companies are having technology to solve problems. They're all using technology to become more efficient. So your daily work might be arranging the shelves in a store, but your company is still being run through technology. And so it's really important to, I think, understand that and where you can find opportunities to make things better with tech. So I think that is really important. I think we've spoken quite a bit on the fact that we live in a world, unfortunately, the only good thing about all the bad things that are happening in our world today is that we have more problems than solutions. Things are broken everywhere, from education to healthcare, to housing, to finance, to employment, like everything needs solutions. And so that just means that herein lies the opportunity for all of us to use all of our perspective and our background and our diverse, ways of how we think and how we work and how things have shaped our thinking to bring that point of view and try to basically solve problems in the business world outside of what that particular role is called. So I think this is what's gonna, I suspect, and this is my belief, this is just my point of view, is that over time, what we're gonna find is that these titles are probably gonna change. It is product manager today and designer today, it may become something different tomorrow, but having the skills to collaborate with people across different functions, breaking down those walls of different functional units and company and trying to solve those real problems, trying to innovate, really understand how innovation happens in the tech world is going to become so key that this is where I believe that the world of product is going. Does that answer your question?
It does. So thank you very much, Bosky, for all your answers. They were really inspiring. Before we wrap up, I would like to thank everyone who joined us today, either here on Zoom or on YouTube, on our live stream. I hope to see you again soon, and have a nice end of the week.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.